Hi loves! So today's video is entitled Sex is what you are, not what you do. And it's in response to a question that one of my students sent in, that Asya sent in, and it goes a little something like this. I feel like I've been cut off from what is my opinion or my experience of my sexuality. It has an overtone of purity that comes from spiritual practices that I've been exploring, and I feel disconnected, desiring to know, how do I really feel about my sexual orientation, about my sexual expression, not how does the world feel about it. And I think this speaks to something deeply core to feminine essence and deeply core to the reclamation of the joy and the power of being a woman fully incarnated as we are in truth. It speaks very much to the movement that's being made from the inside of many of us towards authentic womanhood as it comes through us, as we learn it. As a lot of us are realizing that between pornography, religion, repression, culture, media, over-sexualization, all the things, we may have gotten very far away from the simple, natural, untamed expression and experience of sexuality as the gift, the natural rightness, and the aliveness that it is meant to be for us, as all people, as women especially, and as women, as I'm going to speak to in this video. So, sex is something you are. It's not something you do. And for me, that's the core statement. That's what to know and to abide by if you want to understand what sexuality is for you, what the true expression of it is. Not, are you pleasing someone else? Are you looking good? Are you this orientation or that orientation? Are you drawn to this? What do you like? What are your preferences? Like, be aware that there's a huge terrain of personality exploration that you can do in the realm of sexuality, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it will only touch the top level, right? Your preferences, what you experience to be erotic, what you think of as your sexual orientation, what sexuality really is, moving up through your female body, what pleasure, orgasm, orgasmic potential, what the opening of sexuality is something that is always happening in the moment and is always changing. So one of the places that we get caught the most, I'd say, in terms of our own desire to return to a sense of wholeness and freedom in our own sexuality, fulfillment, is all the many conditioned and unconscious layers of believing that sex is something we do. It's a way we look. It's a way we act. It's how many times we orgasm. It's whatever. It's even genital versus other things, right? What sexuality actually is, moving in you, is a current. It's a living force. And the way to know it is to understand that it's what you are. It will, the sexual expression of your being, opening, pleasure, voice, all the things that are a part of sexual expression will unfold from inside of you if you get on the pulse of your own being and you stay there. So that's where your responsibility and your power lies. You bring yourself to sit right on, I think of it almost like sitting right on that emergent place where who you are as a sexual creature is arising in every moment. It's arising in response to whoever's in front of you or whatever's happening. And that to be on the pulse of it is to become it, right? To understand that sexuality, you as a sexual being, is just something you are. It will never be captured by what you can do or what you think you like to do or what you think you should do. So that applies to all of the conceptual ideas that we might have, purity versus sass versus wanting to wanting to be juicy, wanting to look juicy, or wanting to look dignified, right? All the things that we get, they're all concepts. So to make it so that sex is something you are rather than something you do, which means to become a sexual creature rather than to act like one, to become it from the inside, to know it, to live it, rather than to act it out and feel a little separate from it, a little unfulfilled. I have a few questions and a few notes to go over with you. The first question that came to me then was, well, how do you differentiate? How do you know that you're on your authentic sexual current? Well, it's like what I said already, is that it isn't personality based. It feels alive and it's ever changing. So one of the ways that you can differentiate is just start to identify in yourself what you've come to land on in terms of your personality description of yourself as a sexual creature. So I'm a super sexual creature. I'm a very sensitive creature. I like men. I like women. I like romance. I like it hard and fast. Whatever it is, this turns me on. That doesn't turn me on. I don't like this. Like all your preferences. And just name them. Put them out in front of you like a collection of treasures, right? A collection of something that you hold. And take a minute, look at them, enjoy them, acknowledge them, and then realize that your authentic experience of sexuality is going to come from underneath of all of that. Because true sexuality is a living current. So you want to know, just in your being, you want to be able to differentiate me as Jemana. What do I kind of get about myself? What do I understand about myself and my preferences? But then underneath, what is the sexual current? How does it feel moving through me? How does it open in me? And am I on it? Am I with it? And that is very much about cultivating intimacy with your own being, right? It has nothing to do then with how your sexuality has been portrayed or will be portrayed in the future, or where you think you're going with it. It's an ever arising, abiding source of power, source of self-knowing, and source of personal essence inside of you. So that's the first thing I would say, is how do you differentiate? You notice what you think of as all your personality, as all your sexual preferences, both what you're proud of and think is great, and what you feel like might be flaws or withholding places or shutdowns. Just acknowledge all of it, and then give yourself the very powerful moment of realizing that that's fine and your sexuality is deeper. You're to be on the aliveness of it, the ever-changing nature, so that you have an authentic experience of it, and so that you live inside of it. That's going to be underneath of all of those things. It's going to require courage in you, courage and self-advocacy, self-awareness, courage to, it's always a courageous move to live alive rather than to live into concepts that we've created about ourselves that either make us feel stable or hold us back. Usually do both, right? So it's courageous. And it's also, what other word did I use? I don't remember. It's just it requires self-awareness. You must plumb your own depths. You must live into what you are. Understand that what you are, the aliveness that's inside of you, is your sexual current. And then follow that into what you consider to be more explicitly sexual experiences, right? And that leads into this second note, which is, how do you explore your own authentic sexuality? Like that's where you need to be in order to have it be something that you are, rather than just something you're doing or playing out. And, the simple answer to that question is you take it out of the box, you watch, and you see what turns you on, what opens you up in all of life, right? One of the biggest ways that sex becomes something we do rather than something that we are, that an embodied, juicy woman is something that we do sometimes rather than something that we are and that we live in, is that we have put sex in a box. And we only turn on or open up that box in certain situations. You know, you've got a lover in front of you, you've got a date happening, whatever it is, right? When it fits the concept of what sexuality is, right? When you start to really open into all that you are and all the ways that you respond and open and enter into a dance with life that is a lovemaking, you'll realize that you're always doing it. And that to understand that sex is something you are is to realize that you can live a life where you are always making love to your life because you've taken it out of the box. Not only is it not genitally explicit, what you consider sex to be, it's also the full range of everything from I'm opening, I'm closing, and I need to be held, right? I'm opening and I'm expanding and pleasure is moving and I feel amazing. I'm quiet, I'm dormant, and the holding is what I need by life, right? It's sexuality, love making is the making of love. And it's a conversation that you're in with life. The more that you can understand and live into that conversation in your life, as life approaches you, as you approach yourself, the more you can start to repair the continuity of sexuality in your life, where you're living life. You're in a dialogue. You are in a living dialogue with both what is alive inside of you and what you're feeling, what you're needing from life, what you're offering to life, your generosity, your receiving. And then you're taking that into a bedroom situation. Then you're taking that to meet a lover, someone who you want to share this level, like a more explicitly sexual intimacy with. So that would be my statement of that. How do you explore your own authentic sexuality? I mean, there's a million ways, and I can't get into them so much here, but the underlying point is you take it out of the box. You take it out of the box. You know, you can see all the ways that culture has put it in a box, or that religion, or that spiritual practices, depending on the tradition, have put it in a box. All in all sorts of ways, some well-meaning, some completely distorted, right? So that's one box you're popping out of, is the box that has been created and conditioned around you. The second one is the one that you've created inside of yourself. The distance you've made inside of yourself from who you really are. And a lot of times where that distance comes from is that we judge what's authentically moving. You know, one of the things that I'm guessing is most in the way of experiencing an authentic sexuality is just the general unwillingness that a lot of us have to fully accept what's authentically arising, period. You know, something moves and we immediately are judging it. We immediately are putting it into a picture, and you know, a lot of women deal with the shoulds on the inside. Well, I should be that, or the comparison, or just the lack of inner self-reverence. So as you live into sexuality, as you live into your aliveness as a woman, as an embodied woman who lets life touch her, who lets life open her, who pours forth into life. You know, this is all lovemaking. That's the metaphor that you can use. That's the way you can engage. And it does not have to be explicitly sexual at all. It's a conversation of love that includes the body and that opens you or that shelters you. right? Those are, I would say those are the two major movements of being in a life as a lovemaking experience. It's like, are you being opened right now, or are you being sheltered? Do you need to open and stretch and expand, or do you need to shelter, right? These are two poles, and they can easily be misconstrued into like, oh, I'm feeling turned on or I'm feeling shut down, but that's not what they are, right? So, you know, I'm like, what could I feel like that is just a leading, that's a place to begin your exploration. There are a lot of practices. There are a lot of ways to carve out a level of intimacy with everything that lives inside of you and repair your sexuality from the inside and reclaim it in a way that actually is your own. A lot of them are, I mean, in her mystery school, although it's not entirely sexuality focused, it's very much about creating that. But these are, it's internal practices, right? Practices that bring self-intimacy, self-awareness, and embodiment at the same time. Okay, so the third, moving on, the third question I had for us is, how do you get authentic? So what are the keys to, especially then if we're saying that part of how you arrive to an authentic sense of sex is what I am, not what I do, is to expand it into all of your life, right? To understand yourself as a sexual being all the time, no matter how it's showing up. The other question is, so then how do you get authentic with a partner? If you're going to show up into a sexually intimate situation with another person, what are the keys to that? And what I would say are presence and dropping your agenda. And that's where you want to start, always, with a partner and move forward. If you want to know authentic sexuality. So you can have a million sexual experiences where you explore your preferences, you explore who you are, what you kind of like, what you don't like, exploring your, just to kind of exploring the terrain in that way. And those are valuable. There's a lot of value in just exploring yourself sexually on that level. When you want to, and there is authenticity in that. We're not making anything wrong. It's just that the question is asking, what's deeper than that? How can I be fully in authentic sexuality that is not predetermined by my conditioning, by whatever this lover in front of me wants or thinks, all the things. So what I would say is it's through presence and dropping your agenda. That means, partly it means slowing things down a lot of the time, for sure, letting them peak in things, but starting them slow. Like being present with the touch that you're feeling and you're giving. Being present with how it feels to have someone come and be 5 feet from you, 2 feet from you, touching you, kissing you. Being present with all the thresholds of sexual intimacy, feeling them, right? And letting yourself be in an alive place in response to that. Softening, stepping away, whatever it is that's true for you. So, and dropping the agenda is a lot about, look, don't aim for orgasm. Don't aim for anything. Ride the current, right? The end result can be the same, right? But it's a difference between, I'm going to ride this current and see where it takes me, rather than I have an idea of where I want to go. I have an idea of what would turn this person on in front of me. I have an idea of what would please this person or what would make me feel good about this sexual encounter. This is more the bravery, again, of dropping all agenda and letting it arise moment by moment by moment. So again, one of the places that sexuality becomes inauthentic is that we just get into it and go on autopilot. This is what we do from here, and it's kind of a natural thing, so it's not that hard to figure out. But if you can let it rise, let something move, and then empty out and see what's the next thing, right? So what is a more explicit example of that? It's like, all right, we kiss. You're starting to feel your heat rise and the opening, the heat, the yearning, and you breathe there for a moment. Instead of just letting it take over like that, you rest into it and see what's next, right? What kind of touch is next, right? What kind of anything is next. So presence and dropping agenda, and that's something that you would ideally, obviously, would be shared by the partner in front of you. And you don't necessarily have to like sit down and talk about that before you get together, but it's you can feel it in a field when both people are coming to intimacy for the sake of actual intimacy, actual connection, not the kind of standardized or preferential experience that they have laid out in their head already, or that they've seen portrayed in the media, or all the ways that sex can be compartmentalized and also conditioned inside of our beings. So don't make sex something that is compartmentalized from the rest of your life. To me, that's the biggest thing. It's been a huge violence and yes, whatever. It's been a huge shitty thing, whatever you want to call it, that what has happened is that, the potential of the female being to ebb and flow and ride currents of we're just talking about life force when we're talking about sexuality. We're talking about the way that life force ebbs, flows, opens, the way that God comes through, just the way that magic enters life and that connection happens. That has been so strangely distorted and commodified to become this thing called sex in our culture and our religions that, it's almost unrecognizable from a real, untamed, authentic, stewarded, as in you've become the custodian of your own sexuality and your sexual current, so you're moving wisely with it. That's what authentic sexuality, that's how I would describe it in terms of answering that question. You want to approach sexuality, approach your own being as a mystery that you want to experience, not as a terrain that you want to conquer or understand or master. My experience is that there's a lot in the world, even a lot in the world of, empowered female sexuality teachings and things that are still in subtle ways guiding towards an outcome, guiding towards an agenda, kind of creating a persona of female sexuality, something that we can understand and live into and feel like we've got. But in its deeper way, it's always a mystery, and it is something that arises again and again, and that's what keeps it. That's what keeps us at the place where sexuality and soul overlap and nourish all parts of us and bring the authenticity of soul forward into our lives, not just the freedom of sexual pleasure and things like that. So, sex is something that you are. It's not something that you do. I deeply invite you to start to notice and feel all the subtle currents that move inside of you, to notice the full spectrum of what you are, the emotional being that you are, the soul being that you are, the woman that you are, the mother, all the things that you are, to feel that all as part of the full expression of yourself as a sexual being. Knowing that if you're going to be authentic when you come to sexual intimacy with another person, part of what you have to embrace is that authentically it's going to take you everywhere. It's going to take you to the most vulnerable you've ever been, some of the most powerful you've ever been. It's going to take you to pleasure. It's going to ask you to face places of pain. Sexual intimacy in its most authentic, most soulful way is heart, body, spirit. It's the subtle, it's the gritty, it's all of it, right? So if you bring yourself to get on the current of your own life and live it, sitting on the pulse, letting it be, letting it pulse through you, letting it be quiet, letting it be lusty, letting it be whatever it is, then you will have already practiced and cultivated a relationship to your sexual current before you get into a situation that is more explicitly a lovemaking situation or a partnering situation, a lover experience, where now all of a sudden there's another person in the mix and all sorts of things are going to start moving, right? And the temptation to pull out of it when it gets intense, when you hit a vulnerable place, when you feel a little too exposed, when you have to express a need. That's all those places, expressing a need, needing to express a need, feeling very vulnerable, feeling exposed, starting to feel a lot of love, a lot of opening. Those are all, the intensity of all those things that is often the thing that will snap us out of being authentic in the moment and up into our heads and into more of like a doing, performing, kind of going through the motions thing, because it takes something. It takes a level of resilience and a level of self-advocacy it takes having cultivated a real holding of yourself to be able to stay with yourself and feel sometimes the discomfort of having voice in a sexual situation with another person, of cracking open to pleasure, levels of pleasure you've never experienced before, letting your body and your being open that much. And that is something that you cultivate as a life art, right? And then you bring to places like sexual intimacy where things are going to get way amplified and where the potential for union and beauty and vulnerability becomes very, very magnified, right? And sometimes, and yeah, and sometimes overwhelming if you don't have a sense that you are yourself inside of it. So I think part of what was behind Asia's question is, how can I enter a sexual experience and not lose myself, not lose a connection to my authentic self? How can a lovership, how can I enter a lovership in a way that will take me deeper into myself, make me feel more at home in here, make me know more of who I was really created to be, rather than kind of lead me into a place of feeling just a little empty or just a little removed, just a little unsatisfied and kind of disoriented and disconnected from myself. So thank you, Asya, for the question. I hope that this was helpful. And I guess the overall, again, invitation is to just sit with that statement. Sex is something you are, not something you do. It's something you are, it's not something you do. And as that statement alone starts to settle into your being, what happens? You know, how do you align around that? How does it arrive for you? What that would mean? What that would mean for you? How you could possibly follow the golden thread to that place where you get to live on the pulse of your own deep feminine current. You get to live it in all of its subtlety and beauty, rather than kind of do it for either the sake of your own self-esteem or the sake of someone else. Yeah. So yeah, have fun exploring that. Is there anything else? I don't think so. I think that is what I have in response to that question. And I so strongly encourage you to really take it out of the box and let your life be all one thing, all an expression of all the many facets of yourself, and to not compartmentalize sex in a way that makes it separate from the life that you're living. Because all the stress, everything that you experience in life is going to influence how you're able to open to another. It's like it's all one thing, and I think we've been very dangerously conditioned away from that. Even obviously to the extent of being kind of conditioned that sex somehow is meaningless. It's either dangerous or it's meaningless, right? That's the pendulum swing between repressed, over-moralized. It's dangerous, either as a religious experience or as a moral thing or as in spiritual practice, it's not okay, to it's all good and all it's really about is kind of, this more kind of meaningless sex positivity, or the not meaningless, but the conceptual identification of who we are as a sexual being. It's all words. True untamed sexuality is going to take you beyond all words. It's going to take you into the moment. It's going to take you into something that will completely change your life if you let it, for sure. Blessed be.